do. Hi everyone, and welcome to Azure Greg's chat with Tulika Chaudharie. Probably butchered your name, Tulika. Let me just introduce our guest. Hi Tulika, how are you?
I'm doing good, and it is good of you to have me.
Oh, you're
I'm
very welcome.
Tulika. I am a product manager with Linux App Service, and for the last few months, we've been working on this feature called Sidecar for Linux App Service, and I'm very excited to come over here and talk about it.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Where are you based in the world, Tulika?
I am in India, so I'm in the south of India in Bangalore,
Okay, and
and
what time of night is it there? It must be late on.
it is 9:30 in the
Oh,
night.
apologies for keeping you up.
No
So
problem.
we met at Build last year. So I was working on the Ask the Experts where I ran into you, and you were telling me all about sidecars, and I genuinely had no idea what you were talking about. I'm not honest. So I'm so glad to have you on, and hopefully you can tell us all about it. So without
Thank
further
you.
ado, let's just start. What I'll do is I will add you to the stage. There we go. So you have one or two demos for us today. Is that correct?
Yes, I did prepare some of the demos. We'll see how we are doing on time and we can
Yeah,
cut
no
back
problem.
on things
Yeah,
and we'll
cool.
keep it flexible.
Sounds good.
So I wanted to start by talking about what is the sidecar. Now, for Linux App Service, everything runs as a container. So, even if you know that for Linux App Service, there are two ways in which you can deploy an app. One, you can give us your code and we will run it for you, or you can give us your container and again we'll run it for you. However, in both the cases, whether you give us the code or whether you give us the container, we are actually underlying running everything as a container. So every Linux app that you create is actually running as a container on our Ubuntu machines. So we actually spoke to a lot of customers and we started getting feedback that some of our customers would want to have or want to implement a sidecar pattern. A sidecar pattern is nothing but it allows you to put some common tasks that your application needs, things like logging, observability, and just separate it out into its own container so that you could have a main container which keeps running, but then you have the sidecar which does all these peripheral jobs which are needed for most of the applications. So we announced the public preview for the sidecar pattern at Build this year. And this is the blog. This blog actually came out, before Build, but this gives a basic diagram of what we are trying to do. So we are having the main application, which whether you give us the code or you give us the container is its own container. And we are allowing you to run your peripheral task like logging, connecting to remote services, running some kind of a reverse proxy. All of this can run side by side with your main application. The advantage is that these are now separate entities, so you can actually alter your main application without affecting the sidecar. Or you can use sidecar containers which are already available and just plug them into your application. And I'll show you a demo on how you can do that as well. So I'm going to start with a very basic demo. So this is the app that I want to create. So over here, as you know, we're talking about Linux App Service specifically. All your applications runs on a Linux host. For us, the Linux host is Ubuntu. And every time you create a web app, it is actually, we create this whole environment for the web app. So for my first demo, I'm going to now create this main app, which is going to be Nginx, and I'm going to add three sidecars to the main app. One is a .NET sidecar, a Node sidecar, and a Python sidecar. Now, when I say I add it as a sidecar, it means that it shares some common things. For example, the app settings. So you're familiar with app settings. All app settings are shared with all your sidecars. Your app service storage, which is the /home account, and it also shares the network namespace, which means one sidecar or the main app can talk to each other using localhost. We also have a tutorial, and I know I was just talking to Gregor before we started. We'll post all the links for these examples that I'm talking about. So let's go to the site that I already created. Right now, the option for having sidecars is only available if you create a new site. We are working on a migration story as well, but right now it's just for new sites. So if you create a new site, actually, let me show that real quick. So if you're a little rusty about creating app services, so you can go to the Azure portal and you can say create a resource. And we should be there right at the top somewhere. So you create your web app. And you will notice that you have two options. One is the code option, which is what I said, that you could just say, this is my code, this is my GitHub repo, run this app for me. Right now, Sidecars is available only for container-based app. We are working on the code-based app option as well. It should be available in the next couple of months. But right now, let me show you what happens when you choose your container option. As soon as you choose container, it defaults to Linux, and that's what we are going to use. And you go over here, and you will see an option over here which says that are you trying to use the sidecar support? So by default, you can see that I'm actually on our internal portal, and you can see it's enabled for you. If you try to create a website right now, you will see that by default, it is disabled, but you can enable it. And that gives you all the feature options that I'm going to talk about. So here I've created the website with Sidecar enabled. And the way you can add more containers or add the sidecars is by going to the deployment center. So if you go to the deployment center, you will notice that we have an add button over here. And the add button allows you to add a sidecar to your main application. So you can give a name of your sidecar. You can see that the type is sidecar. You can choose what's your image source. So it could either be Azure Container Registry or Docker Hub, or you could have your own private registry. We recommend that you do provide authentication. So either use admin credentials, or ideally, you should be using managed identity. And then providing the registry URL, the image tag, and the port. And in addition to it, we let you specify startup command. So, when you start a container, you might want to run certain things like populated database, or maybe start up the web server within the container. That could all be there in the startup command. And you can even specify volume mounts. Now, by default, all your sidecars will have the /home volume mount, which is available by default, but you can have additional volume mounts. So for example, if you have a sidecar which does logging, maybe your volume mount is /logs, so that the main container can write the logs in the logs volume mount, while your sidecar can read the logs from there. So here in this case, I have added a main container. I added this when I was creating the website. You can see that this is the main container. But I have added three sidecars over here. Now the name is a giveaway. So you have the main container, which is running Nginx. I've just taken the normal images that you have available on Docker Hub for all of this. All that I've done is downloaded the images and pushed it into my own container registry. And that's what you should do, especially if you think that you have a site which is getting a lot of requests, because if it's in Docker Hub public images, you might run into some kind of throttling limits, or you might run into even some security limits. So we always advise that you put the images into your own container registry before using it. So I've added 3 sidecars to it. Right now, our design is you can add 1 main container and up to 4 sidecars. So I've added 3. And if I go and browse this website, you can see that it brings up the Nginx. As I mentioned, I'm just using the default image that is there on Docker Hub. But I can now do something like .NET Core. And now this starts running my .NET Core app, which is running as a sidecar. So not only the fact that you can run sidecars, but now you can use different languages or different frameworks in the same web app itself. So I have a single web app which is running Nginx, which is running Python, which is running .NET Core, and even Node.js. And that's the power of sidecars. Now, before moving ahead, I wanted to show one quick thing that we have done with sidecars. So the way we are implementing the sidecars under the covers is that we have added, for each website, we've added a site container collection. So here you can see that this is the site container collection. So when you say that you're creating or adding sidecars from the portal, what you're really doing is stuffing things into the container collection. So for each sidecar and the main container as well, we are just stuffing it into our site containers collection. So you can see over here that the site containers collection contains things like the image. It is specifying that this is the Nginx image. That's what I was running by default. And you can go ahead, and if you scroll down, you will see the other images like the .NET Core image or the Python image and so on. We have this available in a repo. It is there linked from the blog. So if you want to run it, it's pretty easy to run. And you could, you don't need to just be limited to this. You can just create your own images and run it as well. So that's my first demo that I wanted to talk about. I'll just pause for a second.
Yeah, very cool.
Question.
Quick question, Tulika. So, did you say there was a limit to have 3 sidecars?
So the limit currently is 4 sidecars and the main app. So the main is 1 container too, and you have +4. But we have been talking to customers, and we have realized that there are customers who want the limit to be a little more flexible and the ability to add more sidecars. We're still evaluating whether we can give you a knob to add more sidecars and expand it, but that's something that we are still under discussion. And as we go towards the GA time frame, we'll probably finalize that.
Okay. One last question. Can you have different versions of .NET running in different containers or different sidecars?
Absolutely. So you could have a .NET 6, a .NET 8, a .NET 9 now running as different containers, and that's all going to work, because that's the beauty of having containers. You're putting in the entire framework inside the container, so it doesn't matter for us, and we will run it all together for you.
Does that also mean that if you had let's just say you had your site in .NET, I don't know, .NET 3.1, you could potentially create new features and put them into a sidecar and use .NET 8, for example?
Yes, absolutely. So you could have a .NET 3.1 app which is running there, and keep in mind that for our code-based deployments, we will at some point, I mean, we've already started deprecating .NET 3.1.
Yeah.
But let's say you do have an app and your timelines are such that we understand it's hard to migrate applications. So you can absolutely just bundle it up into a container and keep running 3.1, and then have your new feature development happening in .NET 8 and just link the main container with the sidecar.
That's pretty powerful. That's very cool, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now moving on to a slightly more useful demo. And in this one, we have several, like, I don't know if you know about this. We have this service called Azure Native ISV service. These are partners that we work with so that they are integrated with our Azure resources. And some of the partners that we've been working with are Datadog, Dynatrace, and Elastic Observability. Now, the reason we first started working with these partners is because for any kind of website, observability is something that is needed more and more often. So it makes sense that you should be able to integrate. Now we do have app insights, and you can absolutely use app insights, but you might already have a subscription for Datadog, and you might just want to use it in your web application. Now, before this, if you wanted to do that, the way you would have done it is you would have downloaded the SDK for Datadog. You would have added it to your project. You would have added the code for it, of course, rebuilt the project, redeployed your project, and then you would have the Datadog integration. What we are trying to do over here is that as a customer, you should not have to do so many things to simply get your data flowing to Datadog. So what we've done over here is that we are working with these Azure native ISV partners, and they have given us their vetted images. So you can see over here that I have added my main site, which is a .NET app in my case, and I have added the Datadog container. Now, the Datadog sidecar is nothing but a container image which Datadog has provided to us. And I have simply taken that image and pushed it into my own container registry. Once I have that set up, I can now just, set up some app settings just to make sure that I have the Datadog API key, etc., to identify where I want to send my data to, and my thing just flows to Datadog. Just to show it in action, let me go ahead and browse this website. And I try to simulate, some error conditions. So this is my home page. Let's go ahead and throw some exceptions. And I know I should have turned this off so you could actually see the exception, but it doesn't matter. Um, and this is simulating a slow app. Just randomly, I'm clicking on stuff to simulate some errors. And now let's go ahead so I already have a Datadog subscription, and I can go to Datadog. The first thing you will realize is that because I have added my Datadog as a sidecar and set up the API keys, in the service catalog of Datadog, you can see that it has recognized my app. .NET Datadog is my app, so it has recognized the app. And I can go ahead and click on the service page over here. And you can see things like what are the requests flowing, and hopefully that should come up soon. I had so many browser windows open that
Oh, good.
so it will show you what are the requests. So over here you can see that I just generated some requests. It has caught the requests. It has even caught the errors that I had. So you can see that I had 6 errors, and showing me that these are 500 errors. I haven't written any code in my application. This is a pure .NET application. I wrote no code. The only thing I've done is added the sidecar for Datadog, which is provided by Datadog, and specify a few app settings, which is basically identifying things like the API key, because it needs to know what is your subscription for Datadog to be able to send the data. That's all I've done. And I can see some of the requests flowing over here. I can even go on things like, I can click on APM, I can go to traces, and it just takes it out of the box. So you can see over here, these are the exceptions which happened. It's showing me it is a 500 error. I can go and click on it in more detail. Now, obviously, you might want something more than this. So over here, for example, it's saying, okay, you got a 500 exception. It may not actually give you things like a full call stack of the exception. And if you want to do that, you would have to write some code to make sure that Datadog logs those exceptions. But however, even if you do nothing, you just out of the box, it can still give you things like this, which will at least give you an idea about how things are working with your application.
Very cool. Yeah, super easy to get running too. Yeah.
Yeah. And not just Datadog, as I mentioned, I'm also working with Dynatrace. So we have two blogs over here, one for Datadog, the second for Dynatrace. And the third partner that we are working with is Elastic Observability. So, we should have something for them pretty soon. So that's going to be interesting. So we give you the choice. If you want to
Mhm.
stick with App Insights, absolutely go use App Insights. But if you like the features, if you've been using one of these partners and you want to do an integration with them, you can go ahead and use it and set up your application.
Very cool.
Okay, so moving on to the third demo that I have lined up. And this one was one of the things that we've been doing, and I know I spoke to you about this, Greg, at one point. We're trying to see what are the scenarios that we have for having sidecars. So we are exploring the scenarios and, trying to come up with more examples of what you can do, because what we have enabled with sidecar, if you will, is more or less the platform
Yeah.
which allows you to build sidecars. But the real power of the platform comes when you have the scenarios which work for it. So over here, another scenario, and again, we got this when we were talking to customers, is that can we leverage sidecars to run some kind of caching mechanism? Again, a very common application for any kind of web app, the ability to have a cache. And so this article is talking about how you can integrate a local Redis cache with your application. Now, obviously, this is not going to scale to multiple scenarios. So if you have an application which is running on multiple instances, then having a local cache doesn't make as much sense. You probably want a distributed Redis. But let's say you are running a small app which is running on a single instance. You don't want to have, well, the additional cost of having a distributed Redis. And you just you just want it there right beside you running with your main application. In that case, you could just run your Redis and use the Redis image provided by Redis itself and run it as a sidecar to your main application. So here you can see that what I've done is, this is again a .NET application. In this .NET application, I am configuring that we are going to use Redis, and we are specifying the connection string. But the connection string is really simple. It's localhost 6379. 6379 is the default Redis port, and it's localhost because remember the diagram that I showed you where everything was running on the same network and could talk to each other. So you don't have to worry about complex network connection strings and how do you go out and open ports on your VNet and so on, because it's just running locally and you can connect to it. And then there is the code, of course, to implement storing things into the cache. And I'm talking about Redis over here. You can substitute it with any other cache that you want to use. You don't need to use, as long as you have a container image for that particular cache, you could just run it with your application. So here I've, set up Redis. I'm just, it's a weather forecasting system. I've set up some options for Redis, and then I've deployed it to app service. And so you can see that I pushed it to the container registry. I have the publish options. I'm using sidecar enabled, and I've added over here my Redis sidecar. So again, the main container, we have the sidecar, which is listening to 6379, and that's all you need to do. Like all the wiring which needs to happen we will take care of that. So we will take care that they sit on the same network, that they can talk to each other, bring up the container, make sure that we maintain the health of the container. That's something that we will do under the covers for you, because we are a PaaS platform, and that's something which is almost given for us. And just to show you in action, so this is, I'm just doing a weather forecast. And
Can I ask a couple of questions?
sure.
So you have a main web app, and you've deployed what, an API? And is it an API
Yes,
you've got? Sorry.
yes,
And
yes.
you're using Redis cache to cache the weather data.
Correct.
Now, how do you push? Silly question here, but how do you push the data to the Redis cache? Is that
So over here, I've taken a very simplistic approach. I already have the data in some JSON files, and I'm
perfect?
just adding it to the Redis cache. Again, this is just for the sake of an
Mhm.
example. But
Yep.
otherwise, if we over here, I have mentioned that we have something called the Stack Exchange. This is a NuGet package that you can use.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Uh, so if you use the NuGet package in your application, you can just simply, do things like set record async, and you can just add data into your
Okay.
cache together
Cool.
with your key.
Very cool.
Also, the advantage is, like you specified a connection string over here and you're pushing the data. Now, at some point you might decide that, oh, my application has become really big and I want to use a distributed Redis cache. Then all you need to do is really change your connection string and nothing
Yeah.
else, because your application, because it is using the NuGet package for Stack Exchange Redis, you don't have to change anything. The same APIs are going to work whether you're using distributed or local cache. And I think
So
that's cool.
yeah, that is cool. So for developers using development environment, you could potentially use this, and then when you go to acceptance environment, you could potentially swap it out for Azure Redis
Yep.
cache.
Yep.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yep. And with .NET, you remember you could do those two kinds of config, like you could do the dev config and you can do the
Mhm.
prod config. And all you have to do is to point to prod and you're all set.
Well,
Like, and I think that's pretty powerful in terms of what you can do with dev and test.
yeah, that's very. I like it.
Um, I wanted to show you real quick. We have a log stream over here. The log stream is every time you run a Docker container, we generate some kind of logs for you. And over here, for example, you can see that we are adding items to the logs. So you can see that we are doing all this. And I wanted to draw a better line over here, but you can see that the data is getting loaded from the cache.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah.
The log stream is actually and we are working on improving this experience. So maybe going forward, we might have a better experience where you can see container wise logs in the deployment center. That's still things that we are working on, and you probably should see it soon. But right now, if you just want to figure out what your container is doing, just exit, put in some console.write statements, because that's all I've done over here, and you will see it in your log stream.
Daft question again here, but before you deploy your sidecar to Azure, you can run all this locally using Docker Desktop. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. So you can run it on Docker Desktop. You just have to make sure that if you're using Windows, Docker Desktop actually, in the last few has been working really well. But if you want to make sure that you are simulating the entire Linux experience, you can use the WSL feature.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
I've been using that very frequently too, because what happens is that sometimes if you have to create startup scripts, etc., for
Yeah.
your Linux machines, the encodings and embeddings are different. So, I often use Docker Desktop with WSL just to make sure that I have the right encodings and
Yeah.
embeddings when I create like SH files and startup files.
Okay. Very cool.
So that is the Redis demo, and I hope this is useful for doing some local cache. And I know scenarios where a lot of customers, even in production, are just running on single instances. You might have a small website which is doing some internal functionality, and you might never need to go to multi-instance. And if that's the case, you can absolutely keep running your Redis as a sidecar and also save some cost while you're at
Yeah.
it.
I mean, Tulika, we had a customer who wanted to use Redis Cache, but weren't really that sure how to go about using it. So this would be a very good example of how to get the devs used to using Redis Cache, checking that it's running,
Yeah,
checking that it's adding stuff to the cache and pulling it from the cache without actually ever going to Azure until they're ready to move to Azure.
you're right, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, Another thing that we are working on is that right now I'm showing you how you can add your container. So you go to a deployment center, you add your container. You have to figure out the right container to add. So, Redis is of course easy because that's, just Docker Hub Redis. But you could have something else which is not very apparent on how do you get the container image. So we are working on some kind of an experience where we will actually give you a drop down, and you can choose something from there. And we are working on what are the scenarios which works for such things. For example, is Redis a good scenario for that? And if that's the case, then you would have like a drop down. You should be able to choose that you want to use, let's say, Redis, and we'll do all the plumbing underneath for you. So, those are things that we are discussing on how to make the feature more accessible
Yeah.
for everybody, just to make sure that it's easy for them to use. Um, I mean,
That does sound
so
good. Yeah.
okay, and now I come to the last demo that I had prepared. And this is, I know that we have to do some AI demo.
Part of your job.
So we've been playing around with, or I've been playing around for the last few weeks with the Phi 3 image. Now, what I wanted to do was to see if I can run the Phi 3 image on my Linux web app, and can I run it as a sidecar. So Phi 3 quite recently announced their on X runtime, which is basically they have these models which can work on CPUs as well. So they have models which are GPU based as well, but they have, like CPU based models available now with Phi 3 as well. This is not directly available on the Microsoft side. You actually have to go to Hugging Face and you can get the model from there. So I wanted to see, what's the performance? Can I even realistically run SLM, a small language model, on app service? And that's the experimentation that I did over here. And you can again go through. So over here I'm talking about how you can download it. This is not available, the Hugging Face model is not available as a container image, at least not right now. So which means you'll have to build your own container image, and that's, I've given you the steps on how to build it. And once you've built your image, you can push it to Azure Container Registry and have your application with a sidecar, which is a small language model. And it's extremely powerful because not everything in this world, not every generative AI application needs a large language model. For example, if you want an application which does some kind of chat functionality, but based on the limited data that you have in your organization, maybe it is like, you have a small e-store which has about 1,000 products, and you want it to be able to do some kind of generative AI chat, but you don't want to do either the expense or the performance impact maybe of using a large language model. In that case, you can run your application with a SLM or a small language model, and the Phi 3 CPU model is a very good fit for it. Just to show you how the application is working, And I apologize. I'm not very good at UX, so the UX is very elementary, and I apologize for that. So I'm going to ask it a question. Service, for example. And you can see that it has started giving a response almost immediately. That's because that it is small. First of all, it is running in your side by side with your main application. It's not even going out on the internet and connecting to a large language model to get data for you. And you get all the benefits of AI, but this is a good place for you to get started. I just wanted to show you the code real quick. And again, there's not much to the code. Now, as I mentioned over here, the thing is that the Phi 3, I specifically wanted the CPU model, and that CPU model is not available as a container image. So I had to create my own container image for that. So the way I've done that is I've taken the CPU model, which is basically just a .onnx file and a data file, and copied it into a folder within the container itself. And then I created a model API.py. I wrote it in Python. You don't have to use Python. You can use .NET or anything else. And I'm basically, just calling the model, passing it the input tokens, and generating a response. This is not exactly RAG, so which means that I'm just going off on and giving you generic responses. But there is this predict API which is getting called, and it's generating some response. And I can go to my main app, and I containerize the main app. Remember, I mentioned that right now the feature is only available for custom container apps. We are working on code base examples as well, but right now it is custom containers. So I had to containerize my main app. And in the main app, all that I'm doing is specifying the API URL that I want to call, which is predict, which is the method that I defined in my model API. And once I get the message, I'm simply, putting the message over here. And because this is a generic method that I'm calling, if I at some point of time decide that I need to move to a LLM or large language model, I can just change my API URL and connect to a large language model.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. One quick
So
question. What data are you pointing that at? What's the source?
For getting the response?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so the model itself has been trained on some internet data. So I
Correct.
don't even have to do anything. I don't have to point it at anything. I just can give it the model. It is already pre-trained
Correct.
on existing data. So I don't have to even do inference. I can do it. There are ways in which you can take a small language model and do further training and inference on the model. But for this small example, I
Mhm.
haven't done anything. I've just taken the model and calling it directly. I am working on, another sample where I'm going to classify that and then try to, limit it to my data.
Yep.
And hopefully I should have that working in the next few days. So that would be more focused on where you can actually say, okay, this is my organizational data, and then you could have your model just work on your organizational data and
Yep.
not go off on its own data.
Mm-hmm. Very cool.
So that's all I had for demos.
Yeah, those
Um,
demos are very good though. I really like them. Yeah, very cool. I'm going to try the Pi 3 one. I'm going to try that one. Yeah, I've
sure.
already had a go at I had to go at the sidecar one, and I'm going to have a go at this one as well. Maybe write it in
Yeah.
.NET. I don't know Python.
Yeah, so the second example I'm working on is using .NET, because I did get the request as soon as I released this post, and they're like, everybody was like, "Oh, don't you have a .NET example?" And so I realized I do need to get a .NET one
Yeah,
working.
very cool. What sort of other scenarios are you thinking about looking at, Tulika? I remember you mentioned Grafana integration.
Yeah, so and again, this is I'm talking to customers and trying to get some of their scenarios that they might be interested in. And one of the things that we found was they would be like they really like some of the dashboards, etc., that
Mhm.
Grafana has.
Yep.
And if we could run Grafana, I mean, you can still have Grafana in your web app today. You could just download the SDK, figure out how to do the coding for it, and deploy your app, and you could run it. But if we can give it as a sidecar where you can just specify a few app settings and you can add your sidecar, that is really cool, and that's another integration that we are thinking of. The other thing I'm thinking of is, like running PyTorch,
Mhm.
or so having a Flask application and a PyTorch application, and having both of them the ability to talk to each other, or even TensorFlow for that matter. And those, we often get customers who are trying to deploy such applications, and they have a really hard time in trying to do that, because there is no template which is available. There's nothing that you can just do. Oh, you just click a few buttons and you can do it. So if we can make some of those tasks easier, that's what I'm aiming to do. And even with this, even the AI model, my aim over here is to take some of the common tasks that we figure out that people need, and just try to see if we can automate those tasks, so the whole deployment, the whole dev cycle becomes a little easier.
Cool. Right. Let me just bring up a couple of banners here. So we have the blog that you show was azure.github.io/app service. So that's the blog. Is that for your
Mhm.
app service team?
Yes, that's for my app service team. We regularly keep posting updates over there. So if you're doing any kind of aggregation or looking at blogs, please do subscribe to it. Um,
Very cool. And
we
do you guys do is it a monthly meetup or what is it you do on YouTube? You've got an app
Oh,
service.
yes. Yes, we have a monthly stand up for app service. We talk about some of the things we are working with. It's mostly a discussion rather than a demo, but it's a good
Mhm.
forum to ask questions if you're stuck on something and if we can help with something. We also
Brilliant.
have a Twitter handle, and we are actively monitoring it. I'll put all the links
Yep.
to you, Gregor, and when once we have the recording going, we can give all the links as well. So in case you
Perfect.
want to connect with us or have some questions and just want to chat.
Very cool. Now, Tulika, where's the best place to get in contact if somebody wants to reach out to you? You're on LinkedIn. I think I've got your LinkedIn here.
Yeah, so I am on Twitter. Well, it's not Twitter now, is it? Is it
X.
X? I am on X, but I don't monitor it that
Okay.
much. But I do monitor LinkedIn
Okay.
constantly.
Yeah.
So if you have questions, if you have some scenarios that you're trying, and you would like some help with that, I would be absolutely thrilled to talk to
Yeah.
you.
I'm personally going to go and play with Grafana and give that a shot. So I'll definitely reach out to you once I get stuck.
Sure, sure.
Um, Last couple of questions. This feature is currently in preview.
Mhm.
I take it it'll be a few months before it hits GA. It's public preview, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so we announced public preview in May this year, which was at Build where I met you. And we are hoping that by the end of this year, we will announce GA for the feature. Uh, I mean, I, I I think that there will be certain things that we'll continue working on even after
Mhm.
we announce the GA. For example, all these different scenarios that I was talking about. Can
Yeah.
we provide an easier integration method? Those are things we are constantly investigating and we'll keep on adding. But the feature itself, at least from the platform standpoint, we are hoping to GA by the end of this year.
Cool. And how would somebody give feedback if they were stuck on this? Just reach out to yourself, or is there a bit in the portal that they can give some feedback on the sidecar?
Yeah, so we have a weekly triage for feedback.azure.com. If you go to feedback.azure.com, you can, go ahead and like open a new issue and we triage it or every second week. So we would respond to you, and that's one way to get to it. I can also share an email address that we created. This is a distribution group that we created in case you're running into an issue. I will share that out in case you want to reach on that. And of course, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn, or you can reach out to Gregor and he will be able to get hold of me.
Brilliant. I was just thinking out loud there about potentially running like WordPress on as a main app and then having sidecar containers. That might be an interesting one.
Yeah, and that's another scenario that we are looking at. So right now we do have a WordPress offering. So if you go to Azure App Service, you can create a new WordPress site. That's an image that we have really worked hard on making sure that it is optimized. Because, running a CMS, even though from a user standpoint it's very easy, it is harder to do from a platform standpoint because a CMS is based such that it has a lot of content. And to make sure that your CMS is performant, that's the work that we've done for WordPress, making sure that we've implemented local caching, we've got an integration with Redis and stuff like that to make sure it's performant. So we are looking at seeing that, if we can have our sidecars like have WordPress and then maybe add some more sidecars to WordPress. Redis is another example where it could implement some local caching. So yes, absolutely, we are exploring that option.
Last question. Is there any plans to do an MVP product group thing meeting about this topic?
I am, more than happy to do it. I need to figure out how to do it,
Okay.
or who the right people are to get
Right.
started on it. And, if you guys know or can point me, I would be more than happy to.
Okay. I'll see if I can find some people who know more about it than I don't know
Sure.
anything about it. So hang on, we've got one more comment. Somebody's just, Renee, somebody from work's just caught this and they're going to definitely watch it. Yeah, hi Renee, just say hello. Yeah, thank you very much for coming on. This is a really interesting feature that I think not too many people know anything about. So I'm definitely going to blog about it and put it on all the socials so people know a little bit more about sidecars. It's very interesting
Yes,
and very easy to get set up.
that is great. And before you put your blog post, I'll give you a bunch of links if you can just add
Yep,
it.
I'll do it. No
And we'll
problem. Yeah, I'll reach out to you after this and we can definitely do that. I'll probably write the blog post tonight just so it's fresh in my memory.
sure.
Tulika, thank you very much for coming on. If you ever want to come back on, you're absolutely more than welcome. If there's any
Thank
other app
you.
features you want to come on or anyone else from your team, please just let me know.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. This was
I'll
great.
yeah, no, thank you. Thanks. I know it's late at night, so I won't keep you too long. I'll just say thank you to everyone for watching. And if you're watching the recording, reach out to me if you've got any questions. And I'm just going to finish off by playing my little video, which I can never find. No, I'm not going to bother. Oh, there we go. So I'll just put this in.